TSA spots and stuff, you know, do it. We've talked about how the political atmosphere has changed several times. I see us coming into a kind of a difficult period right now where the Congress, at least at the national level, is so fragmented that not a lot can get through, and that most state governments are hurting. I know here in Michigan you guys have been suffering for a long time economically, but that doesn't mean trails in fact may thrive in periods of adversity. I mean, you can think it was born in 1968 and some of its antecedents go back to the 30s. Maybe we can take advantage of hard times to buy land cheaper. I mean, you know, to look at it as an opportunity. So there are 11 national scenic trails, there are 19 national historic trails, which is almost double what there was when I started this job 22 years ago. There were 17 or 16 trails, then one was added right away. And so it's gone from 16 to 30 in my piece of this career, which I find kind of astonishing. Another thing, we were talking about this on the way down in the car, is the trail system, like the wilderness system and the Wild and Scenic River system, but I can't think of any other system, in the federal government at least, is not just the province of one agency. Now you think of the national parks, you think of the National Park Service, you think of national forests, you think of the National Forest Service, but the trails system is shared among 3 agencies as administrators and 6 or 7 agencies as on-the-ground managers. So you have Corps of Engineers has a role in the water park trails, especially Lewis and Clark. And BLM owns on your map, the yellow land out west is BLM land, which means they have more mileage of trail on the ground than any of the rest of us, but they only administer 1 trail. We, the Park Service, has the least amount of federal mileage, but we administer 20 trails and co-administer 21 trails, and co-administer 2 more with BLM. So there's this interesting kind of disconnect between what's on the ground and what's being coordinated trail-wide. So interagency communication and coordination is just really important. I've had the privilege of chairing this federal interagency trails working group for 20 years, which is way too long for one person to do it, but everybody else says, Steve, we'd rather have you chair it than the rest of us, so you're chairman for life. Well, I'm going to retire in 2 or 3 years, and when I retire, somebody else is going to have to take it on. I don't plan to die first, but you know, that's the way it goes. And of course, we've seen, as with any organization, shifts in leadership. We've seen shifts in leadership, obviously, in the White House, and the Secretary of Interior rotates every so often, the heads of these agencies. So there are lots of people who have an interest or not in these trails, and it keeps shifting. So you have to kind of pay attention to who is in charge and who's on first base and who you can tap, because it's when a chain of leadership gets interested in something and makes it a priority and gets funding that you move forward. And the land acquisition for the Appalachian Trail and the success of that wasn't accidental. There was a nice convergence by coincidence in the Carter administration where they could pour the dollars and set up the staff to get that thing moving. And so I think all of us in the Trails Committee have to be vigilant for that. It's like looking for the penguin is under the ice trying to get up to the sunlight, and the ice all of a sudden breaks and there's convergence of a crack, and you take advantage of it to save yourself. Well, that's kind of what we all have to be thinking about. And also at the state level, a lot of trails it's important to be working with the state trail coordinator and the state agencies. Often tourism and economic development can be great allies. We have a rail trail project in Pennsylvania that's part of the Potomac Heritage Trail, believe it or not. The Potomac Heritage Trail that leaves the Potomac and goes up to Pittsburgh on a thing called the Great Allegheny Passage, which is one of America's newer and more interesting rail trails on a railroad grade that's barely 1%, but it gets over the Allegheny Mountains, Eastern Continental Divide, to go down to Pittsburgh. And there, the state of Pennsylvania, seeing the need to revitalize little old railroad and mining towns along that route that were dying on the vine. And driving around here, I see a few towns like that. The gas stations are all closed up. The Great Allegheny Passage is suddenly, with some state help, just some seed money for economic development, suddenly the bike shops are going in, suddenly the beds and breakfasts are opening up. A number of these little towns have been turned around just by the presence of this trail. So we're beginning to see stuff like that happen, and these trails are taking on an economic value and life that no one imagined that they would have. So let's talk about some of the hot issues right now. I hate to say this, but get ready for U.S. government downsizing. What I see coming over the next, say, 3 years in the federal budget is a 5 to 10% cutback each year. So I don't know what your current finances are with the Park Service in terms of cooperative agreements, but figure out how to live with a little bit less. We're going to do our best to protect those budgets, but often it's way out of our hands. So people have become too dependent on the federal dollar, they better figure out how to raise other money to make up the difference or streamline their operations. The other thing that's along the lines of that, and this is a big topic up in Grand Rapids this week, there are about 10 transportation programs. Well, I'll year back. In 1991, surface transportation funding was revolutionized under Senator Patrick Moynihan and took the form of, ICE-T, Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act of 1991, ISTEA. And that's been renewed twice since then. So basically, 3, 6, or 7-year cycles have gone on since 1991. And that includes money for roads and highways and federal transit, any surface transportation. And built into ICE-T were a series of new programs which took transportation money in a new direction. Scenic Byways program was part of it. A thing called Transportation Enhancements, which was 10% of any road project budget had to be spent outside the pavement for landscaping, for trails, for transportation museums, for signs, for all kinds of things like that. And then the Rec Trails program, and every state got a share of the Rec Trails program by formula for motorized, non-motorized, and mixed-use trails. And especially TE, Transportation Enhancements, and Rec Trails program, this is a ballpark guess, but I'm guessing over those 20 years has probably put out about $3.5 to $4 billion in project money for trails of all kinds, especially rail trails. And you guys in Michigan have benefited from that. A lot of your rail trails are that money may all dry up because this year both the White House and the conservatives in Congress who control the transportation committees want to just put the money into roads. Whether the Rec Trails program and Transportation Enhancements and other programs like it survive at all or are rolled into one livable program, livable communities program, I don't know what the criteria for that would be, but I think you're going to see a cutback on that kind of funding, and programs like the Rec Trails program either merged with others or abolished. And that could be unfortunate for states that are in the middle of projects where they need another couple of years of TE money to get finished. So that's another consequence of this paring down and dealing with the federal debt. In the Park Service, we have several kinds of, we put money into planning, we put money into operating the trails, we put money into special projects, and we put money into land acquisition. Those are kind of 4 places we put money. But for the operations of these trails and the base budget that the North Country Trail operates under within the federal government that then creates cooperative agreements that come to NCTA. When I got there in 1989, that was 1.1 million, and that covered operations of about 9, 10, 11 trails, including the Appalachian Trail, which used more than half of that. Today, that number's up to 14.5 million. So in 20 years, we've grown that number by a magnitude, but the number of trails has doubled. And it goes to this partnership. I give all the credit to this group and the partnership, and it's local folks, either at the chapter level or the trail group number, who come to Washington every February for Trails Advocacy Week and meet with the senators, meet with the congressmen, meet with the appropriations committee, meet with the staff, meet with administration officials, and convince them that for even at this level of spending, for every dollar they put into the trails, it's matched by $1 of your time. So last year, the partnership for FY10, the partnership documented $35 million worth of volunteer time and financial contributions that collectively all 35 organizations that belong to them put into the National Trail System. That's more money than the feds put into these trails. And that speaks well on Capitol Hill, that for every dollar invested, the public out there is enough to match it. So how long we can keep that game going, I don't know. But that to me is a very powerful number. So we've talked, I've jumped ahead here, okay. But I guess in closing, I'm already down at the end of my little pieces here. I want you to keep up the good work that you're doing. Not that I know the details of this particular chapter. I'm a big fan of the NCTA for a while. This group, that Partnership for the National Trail System, has held biennial conferences since 1991. That was the second one. The first one was kind of an organization in 1988, but 91, 93, 95, 97, etc. And in those 90s years, this group, North Country Trail Association, not just this chapter, but this group always had the biggest contingency of folks who came. Now that was in the days when we only had 75 or 100 people, and Derek Blount would show up with 5 or 6 other people, and they were like 10% of the conference. These days, I don't see quite as many NCTA people, but that's because we're dealing with way more trails. and more emphasis on historic trails, because there are more historic trails people there. But I guess I would encourage you to think about coming to those biennial conferences. We had one this last May in Abington, Virginia, that I thought was very informative, very well organized. You guys sponsored one in Duluth 4 years ago, 6 years ago,
2007.
somewhere, yeah, 4 years ago. That was wonderful, so it's probably not your turn to sponsor another one quite yet. There are a lot of work, but it's a great way to welcome in the entire National Trails System family and show off your trail when you want to do that. I guess I would encourage you to think up ways to engage your neighbors and your friends and the population in general around here, especially young people. You know, if there's not an outing club at Western, get one started and have young people, invite them to come out and do trail work on the North Country Trail. This trail, I believe, goes within 5 miles of more universities and colleges than any other trail in the entire system. And so you have a great opportunity to do that if you want to. That's one of the ways the Appalachian Trail has morphed over the years. Yale and Dartmouth, they all have outing clubs, and they sometimes take sections of the trail and are maintainers doing that. And I also brought for Larry a presentation that I could sign. Where is he? Is he still here? Get over here.
Where's Larry?
Anyway, because you're new at this is a history of the National Trail System.
Oh, awesome.
It's now out of print. I wrote it with the help of some interns for the anniversary in 2008. And I have a couple of copies left, and I thought you could take this with you and circulate around if anybody's interested in the history of how this system evolved. We actually stand on the shoulders of lots of giants who preceded us. And unless we take time to document who they were, the Emily Graders of the world, we forget and we think we're just in this by ourselves. We're not in this by ourselves right here. So enjoy this, spread it around.
Great.
I have a couple of extra copies. My goal is, and again, if you have some PhD students in history, to do like a 200-page version for 2018 when the National Trail System turns 50.
Cool.
So you guys are at the
Thank you very much.
forefront.
Appreciate it.
If there's any questions, but I don't want to take too much